Some films shake Hollywood to its core, sparking outrage, protests, and even bans. These aren't just movies. They're time capsules of controversy, challenging societal norms and forcing uncomfortable conversations. While some were ahead of their time, others pushed boundaries that many believed shouldn't have been crossed. Hollywood may have tried to bury them, but their legacy refuses to fade. Join us as we uncover 17 of the most controversial films Hollywood wished you'd forget forever. Salo, or The 120 Days of Sodom, 1975. Some films push boundaries, but Salo, or The 120 Days of Sodom, shattered them entirely. This shocking and deeply controversial movie remains banned in several countries even decades after its release. Directed by Pier Paolo Pasolini, this 1975 film is infamous for its graphic depictions of violence and exploitation. It's a chilling reflection of the darkest sides of humanity. The story centers on four wealthy men in fascist Italy during World War II. They kidnap teenagers and subject them to horrifying acts of violence and torture over 4 months. But Pasolini wasn't just trying to shock audiences. He used these horrors to criticize political corruption, consumerism, and authoritarian regimes. The film is split into 4 parts, inspired by Dante's Divine Comedy. Each section delves deeper into human depravity, making viewers question morality, power, and control. Despite its artistic ambitions, the movie's brutal content made it extremely controversial. It was banned in Italy shortly after its release and faced similar fates in countries like Australia and the UK. Even in the US, it sparked legal battles, with a video store owner in Cincinnati arrested for selling it. Pasolini's murder just weeks before the film's premiere added an eerie layer to its legacy. The mystery surrounding his death has only amplified the film's notoriety. Over the years, Salo has influenced filmmakers like Lars von Trier and Michael Haneke, who push boundaries in their own works. Faces of Death, 1978. In 1978, Faces of Death hit the screens, shocking audiences worldwide with its gruesome imagery and controversial premise. The movie was presented as a documentary narrated by a fictional pathologist named Dr. Francis B. Gross, who explored the many ways people meet their end. It combined actual footage of real deaths with staged scenes, making it hard for viewers to distinguish fact from fiction. The film gained notoriety for its graphic content. Some of the most talked about moments, like the monkey brain scene, turned out to be fake. However, it also included real footage such as medical cadavers and news clips of tragic events, which only added to its unsettling reputation. While critics panned it as exploitative, it found a massive audience, earning over $35 million globally and gaining a cult following. But Faces of Death didn't come without consequences. It was banned in several countries due to its disturbing content. In the UK, it was labeled a video nasty and banned under the Obscene Publications Act. Even when it was later allowed on DVD in 2003, over 2 minutes of footage were cut. In Australia, the movie was outright banned in 1980, though bootleg copies circulated. It was finally unbanned in 2007. New Zealand also banned the film in 1989, and Germany heavily censored its VHS release until the ban was lifted in 2022. Despite the backlash, the movie became a rite of passage for daring viewers in the 80s and 90s. Its mix of real and staged horror still sparks debate, cementing Faces of Death as one of the most controversial films of all time. Viridiana, 1961. Luis Buñuel's Viridiana hit theaters in 1961 and immediately stirred up a storm. The story followed a young nun, Viridiana, whose faith and morals are tested after visiting her uncle's estate. What starts as an innocent journey spirals into shocking events, leading to a controversial finale where Viridiana is implied to join her cousin and his girlfriend in a polyamorous relationship. For its time, this was unthinkable, and the outrage was swift. The film was made during Francisco Franco's strict dictatorship in Spain. Despite the country's heavy censorship, Viridiana managed to slip through the cracks, but when it won the Palme d'Or at the Cannes Film Festival, things took a sharp turn. Franco's government was humiliated by the international attention, especially after the Vatican publicly condemned the movie. They called it blasphemous and anti-religious, with scenes like a group of vagrants reenacting the Last Supper adding fuel to the fire. Franco's regime acted quickly. Viridiana was banned in Spain, and all official records of the film were erased. It was as if the movie had never existed. Outside Spain, the backlash continued. Some countries refused to screen it, while others heavily censored it. Ironically, this attempt to bury the film only made it more infamous. Years later, Viridiana was rediscovered and restored, eventually being recognized as a masterpiece. In 2012, it was even named one of the greatest films of all time. Buñuel, as always, remained unapologetic, saying, "I didn't set out to be blasphemous, but the Pope knows better." Ecstasy, 1933. Few films in history have stirred as much controversy as Ecstasy. Released in 1933, this Czech romantic drama took audiences by surprise with its bold content and raw emotion. Starring a young Hedy Lamarr, then still known as Hedy Kiesler, it wasn't just a film, it was a lightning rod for debates about art, morality, and censorship. The plot revolved around Eva, a young woman in a lifeless marriage to an older man. Frustrated and yearning for passion, she leaves him and falls in love with a vibrant young engineer. While the story itself was daring, it was the visual storytelling that made waves. A scene depicting a woman's intimate pleasure and another featuring Lamarr swimming nude were groundbreaking and shocking for their time. Behind the scenes, Lamarr's experience was just as dramatic. She later revealed that she felt pressured into doing the nude scenes, claiming the director deceived her about how the footage would be used. On the other hand, crew members refuted her claims, stating she understood the role's requirements. Regardless, these scenes fueled a global uproar, with the Vatican condemning the film and countries like Germany banning it entirely. The film even caused tension in Lamarr's personal life. Her first husband, Friedrich Mandl, spent a fortune trying to erase every copy of the movie. Despite his efforts, the film survived and became a landmark in cinema history. For Hedy Lamarr, Ecstasy was both a challenge and a stepping stone. It catapulted her into the spotlight, paving the way for her Hollywood career and later recognition as a brilliant inventor. Fritz the Cat, 1972. Released in 1972, Fritz the Cat became a groundbreaking moment in animation history. Directed by Ralph Bakshi and based on Robert Crumb's comic strip, this was no ordinary cartoon. It earned the first ever X rating for an animated film, instantly setting it apart from the family-friendly fare that Disney dominated. But what made Fritz the Cat so controversial? The story follows Fritz, a free-spirited and rebellious cat, navigating life in 1960s New York City. Fritz drops out of college, explores drug use, engages in risque encounters, and unintentionally finds himself entangled in radical leftist politics. The film's explicit depictions of sex, profanity, and drug use caused immediate backlash. Conservative audiences were outraged, labeling it immoral, while Robert Crumb, the creator of the original comic, distanced himself from the film, accusing it of mocking the counterculture movement it portrayed. Despite the controversy, Fritz the Cat wasn't banned outright in many places, but it faced challenges. Some theaters refused to screen it, while countries like Britain demanded cuts to reduce its explicit content. In the United States, the film's X rating limited its distribution, yet it still became a massive financial success, earning $90 million globally. The film was also a pioneer. It proved that animation could tell adult stories, paving the way for shows like South Park and Family Guy. While it wasn't universally loved, Fritz the Cat changed the perception of what cartoons could be. Even now, Fritz the Cat remains an iconic and bold piece of filmmaking. Its daring approach continues to spark conversations about art, censorship, and the role of animation in storytelling. Do the Right Thing, 1989. Released in 1989, Spike Lee's Do the Right Thing instantly became one of the most talked about films of its time. The movie takes place in a Brooklyn neighborhood on a sweltering summer day and shows how racial tensions between black residents and the Italian-American owners of a local pizzeria boil over, leading to tragedy and chaos. It wasn't just a story, it was a wake-up call for America. Speaking of which, the film didn't shy away from controversial topics. It openly addressed racism, police brutality, and the raw anger simmering in diverse communities. One of the most shocking scenes shows a black man, Radio Raheem, being choked to death by the police, which angered some viewers and terrified others. Critics feared the movie might inspire riots in neighborhoods already struggling with racial tensions. Many columnists even predicted violence after the movie's release. Spike Lee called these claims offensive, arguing that no one said such things about violent Hollywood action films. He believed the backlash revealed more about the critics' prejudices than about the film itself. While Do the Right Thing wasn't banned, it faced significant pushback. Some theaters hesitated to screen it, and heated debates erupted in the media. The film's ending, where Mookie, a central character, throws a trash can through the pizzeria window, added to the controversy. Was it an act of destruction or a way to save lives by redirecting the crowd's anger? Spike Lee left the answer open, but the question continues to spark discussions. Despite the uproar, the movie became a cultural milestone. It showed the world the harsh realities of race relations while challenging viewers to think deeply about justice and humanity. The Good Earth, 1937. The Good Earth is a Hollywood adaptation of Pearl S. Buck's novel, telling the story of Chinese farmers struggling through famine and political turmoil before World War I. The film was released in 1937, earned critical acclaim, including 5 Academy Award nominations, and won Best Actress for Louise Rayner and Best Cinematography. But behind the accolades lies a history of casting controversies and cultural insensitivity that has tarnished its legacy. Perhaps the most glaring issue was the leading roles of Wang and Olan that were given to white actors Paul Mooney and Louise Rayner. The studio argued that an all-Chinese cast would not attract American audiences, which was a decision rooted in Hollywood's blatant racism. Chinese-American actress Anna May Wong, a close friend of Buck, desperately wanted the role of Olan but was rejected. Adding insult to injury, white actors in heavy makeup portrayed Chinese characters, standing alongside actual Chinese actors in minor roles, making the disparity painfully obvious. The film's portrayal of Olan also drew criticism. Her character is entirely subservient, working tirelessly without complaint, even collapsing from exhaustion while gathering wheat during a storm. She gives birth moments later, only to keep working. When Olan finally dies from sheer exhaustion, her husband Wang realizes her worth, but it's too little, too late. His character faces no consequences for his selfishness, leaving a bitter taste for many viewers. While The Good Earth was never banned, it faced criticism for its lack of authenticity and perpetuation of harmful stereotypes. Poison, 1991. Released in 1991, Poison is a bold and experimental film by Todd Haynes that broke new ground in independent cinema. Premiering at the Sundance Film Festival, it won the Grand Jury Prize and sparked debates across the country. The film weaves together 3 distinct stories: hero, horror, and homo, each with its own style, but all exploring themes of alienation, persecution, and deviance. In Hero, a young boy miraculously flies away after shooting his abusive father. Horror tells the story of a scientist who transforms into a grotesque leper after creating an elixir of human sexuality. Homo explores the obsessive relationship between 2 inmates, blending gritty prison drama with dreamy flashbacks. Inspired by the works of French writer Jean Genet, Poison challenges viewers with its layered storytelling and bold commentary on sexuality and society. The film's explicit gay themes caused an uproar. Reverend Donald Wildman led a campaign against Poison, criticizing the National Endowment for the Arts, NEA, for funding it with a $25,000 grant. Conservative groups called the film indecent, with some claiming it had no artistic merit. And under pressure, the NEA chairman eventually resigned. Although Poison wasn't officially banned, it faced backlash from conservative communities, with calls to restrict its screenings. Despite this, the film was praised for its innovation and intelligence. It is now seen as a landmark in new queer cinema, paving the way for LGBTQ+ representation in film. So while Poison dared to be different, and though it stirred controversy, it also opened doors for new voices and stories in cinema. Last Tango in Paris, 1972. In 1972, Last Tango in Paris shocked audiences worldwide with its raw and intense portrayal of a complicated relationship. Directed by Bernardo Bertolucci and starring Marlon Brando and Maria Schneider, The film tells the story of a grieving American man and a young Parisian woman who enter a deeply emotional and sexual affair. While it gained critical acclaim and financial success, its controversies overshadowed much of its praise. The movie premiered at the New York Film Festival and quickly became infamous for its explicit content. The MPAA gave it an X rating in the United States, which was later changed to NC-17. Several countries banned it outright, including Italy, where authorities confiscated the film and destroyed copies. It was considered indecent and unfit for public viewing in places like Spain and Portugal as well. The most controversial moment comes from a now infamous scene where Brando's character physically assaults Schneider's, using butter as a prop. Schneider later revealed that the scene was not in the script and she wasn't informed beforehand. She felt deeply humiliated and betrayed by both Brando and Bertolucci. Though the scene was simulated, Schneider's emotional distress was real, leaving a lasting impact on her life. The backlash to the scene led to debates about ethics in filmmaking. Critics questioned whether shocking an actor for authenticity crossed ethical lines. Speaking of which, Bertolucci's later comments that Schneider was too young to understand only added fuel to the fire. Despite the controversy, Last Tango in Paris became a cultural touchstone. The Silence of the Lambs, 1991. When The Silence of the Lambs hit theaters on February 14, 1991, it was an instant success. Over its first weekend, it grossed nearly $14 million and stayed at number 1 at the U.S. box office for 5 weeks. The film, starring Jodie Foster as FBI trainee Clarice Starling and Anthony Hopkins as the chilling Hannibal Lecter, became a cultural phenomenon. But not everyone was impressed. The film sparked protests from LGBTQ+ activists due to its portrayal of Buffalo Bill, the villain who was depicted as a disturbed individual with transsexual undertones. Many felt this reinforced harmful stereotypes, associating queerness with deviance and violence. Protests were held outside theaters, with activists voicing their concerns about how the film portrayed gender identity and mental illness. Director Jonathan Demme later addressed the backlash by taking on Philadelphia, a courtroom drama about AIDS, in an attempt to support LGBTQ+ representation. While the film wasn't banned, it faced significant scrutiny and criticism. Decades later, when The Silence of the Lambs was re-released in the UK in 2017, its rating was reduced from 18 to 15. Some argued this was because audiences had become desensitized to such themes, while others believed the film had normalized serial killer tropes now common in crime dramas. Despite the controversies, The Silence of the Lambs is still a landmark in thriller cinema. It remains one of the few films to win Oscars for Best Picture, Best Director, Best Actor, and Best Actress. However, its legacy is often discussed alongside the debates it sparked, reminding audiences of the power and the responsibility of storytelling. In the Realm of the Senses, 1976. Directed by Nagisa Oshima, this 1976 erotic drama was based on the real-life story of Sada Abe, a woman whose intense love affair led to a shocking crime in 1930s Japan. The film is infamous for its graphic sexual content, with unsimulated scenes that crossed boundaries rarely explored in mainstream cinema. Oshima faced strict censorship laws in Japan that would have made his vision impossible to achieve. To work around this, the undeveloped footage was shipped to France, where the film was processed and edited. Even so, when the movie premiered in Japan, its explicit scenes were heavily censored. The Japanese government charged Oshima and the film's publisher with obscenity, but they were eventually acquitted after years of legal battles. Internationally, the film sparked outrage. It was banned upon its U.S. premiere at the 1976 New York Film Festival, though it was later screened uncut. In Australia and Israel, the movie faced bans due to its explicit scenes, with Australia only releasing the full version in 2000. Belgium banned it until 1994, and in Canada it was initially rejected in most provinces except Quebec, Manitoba, and British Columbia. Even in countries where it was allowed, many screenings were restricted or heavily censored. The film's raw portrayal of sexuality divided audiences. Some praised it as art, while others labeled it obscene. Despite the backlash, In the Realm of the Senses is now recognized as a bold cinematic statement about desire, power, and freedom, remaining uncut in many countries as part of its legacy. Deep Throat, 1972. In 1972, Deep Throat changed the landscape of cinema forever. The film, directed by Gerard Damiano, followed a bizarre plot where a woman discovers her long-lost clitoris is in her throat. Starring Linda Lovelace, the 62-minute movie sparked an enormous wave of attention, both good and bad. And the film wasn't just another adult movie, it became a cultural phenomenon, drawing in mainstream audiences, including celebrities like Jack Nicholson and Jacqueline Onassis. Known as porno chic, it was the first X-rated film to gain massive popularity. But with fame came controversy. Deep Throat faced fierce backlash from religious groups, feminists, and the government. Critics called it exploitative, with protests erupting across the U.S. Linda Lovelace later claimed she was coerced into participating in the film, which added fuel to the fire. The FBI even investigated, and Damiano was arrested on obscenity charges. The movie was banned in several countries. In the US, many states barred it from theaters, and in the UK, it didn't see a cinema release until 2005. In Australia and Brazil, it faced outright bans due to its explicit content. Despite the legal battles and its association with organized crime, Deep Throat reportedly grossed $600 million worldwide, making it one of the most profitable films ever. Today, the film is both criticized for its exploitative history and recognized for its impact on culture. Cruising, 1980. When Cruising hit theaters on February 15, 1980, it stirred up a storm of controversy. Directed by William Friedkin and starring Al Pacino, the film followed a police officer going undercover in New York's gay leather bar scene to catch a serial killer targeting gay men. The movie's gritty portrayal of the queer underground culture offended many LGBTQ+ activists who felt it promoted harmful stereotypes. Even before its release, protests surrounded the film's production. Activists disrupted shooting, fearing the movie would spread fear and misunderstanding about the gay community. When it finally premiered, these protests only grew louder. The backlash was so intense that some theaters refused to screen the film. Critics, too, slammed the movie for its confusing storyline and controversial themes, though it managed to earn $19.8 million at the box office. Despite the outrage, the movie was not officially banned, but it faced resistance. Some theaters refused to show it, and its reception in queer communities was overwhelmingly negative. Over time, however, opinions about Cruising have softened. Some now view it as a snapshot of a bygone era, capturing a subculture that was later devastated by the AIDS epidemic. The film's open-ended finale also became a point of debate. Viewers were left questioning whether justice was truly served or if the killer had escaped. While initially criticized for this ambiguity, the ending has since been praised for sparking deeper conversations about identity and morality. Today, Cruising remains divisive, hailed by some as a daring exploration and condemned by others as a damaging misstep. Either way, it's a film that continues to spark conversations decades later. Pink Flamingos, 1972. John Waters' Pink Flamingos is certainly a film unlike any other. Released on March 17, 1972, it quickly became one of the most shocking cult classics of all time. Starring the iconic drag queen divine as Babs Johnson, the self-proclaimed filthiest person alive, the film is filled with grotesque and absurd scenes designed to push every possible boundary. From bizarre family dynamics to a truly infamous ending involving dog feces, it's a movie that thrives on breaking taboos. However, this outrageousness didn't come without consequences. The film was banned in several countries, including Switzerland, Norway, and Australia. In Canada, some provinces outright refused to screen it. In Australia, an X-rated version was released on VHS in 1984, but it was later pulled from distribution. When the film was re-released in 1997, cuts were made to meet the R18+ classification, but it still remained highly controversial. New Zealand initially allowed the film with an R18 rating, but later refused classification upon resubmission in 2024, effectively banning it altogether. The film's most controversial moments include scenes of animal cruelty, incest, and explicit sexual acts, making it a lightning rod for outrage and censorship. Despite this, Pink Flamingos gained a loyal following. Fans saw it as a bold rejection of societal norms, a film that wasn't afraid to be as filthy and outrageous as possible. Love it or hate it, it cemented John Waters as a filmmaker unafraid to take risks, and it made Divine a legend in the world of cult cinema. Even decades later, its shock value hasn't faded, and it remains a staple of midnight screenings and underground film festivals. Peeping Tom, 1960. Peeping Tom was one of the most controversial films of its time. Released in 1960, this British psychological thriller followed a deeply unsettling story. Directed by Michael Powell, the film revolves around a man who films his victims' final moments of terror before killing them. The movie explored voyeurism, obsession, and psychological trauma, themes that were far ahead of its time, and so the backlash was swift and harsh. Critics tore the film apart, calling it disgusting and immoral. Some even compared Powell to the Marquis de Sade. Reviewers described it as nauseating and said it should be flushed away. Audiences at the premiere were so shocked that no one even approached Powell or the lead actor, Karl-Heinz Bohm, afterward. Speaking of which, censors didn't hold back either. In Finland, the film was outright banned. In the UK, Peeping Tom was heavily criticized, and the negative reaction essentially ended Powell's directing career. This was the same year Alfred Hitchcock released Psycho, which had a similar theme but was celebrated instead of condemned. Despite the harsh reception, the movie gained a cult following years later. In the late 1970s, Martin Scorsese helped reintroduce it to audiences, funding a re-release. Since then, Peeping Tom has been reassessed and is now hailed as a masterpiece. The British Film Institute ranks it among the greatest British films of all time. And so the film's reputation has transformed over the years. Once a career killer for Powell, it's now seen as a groundbreaking exploration of horror and voyeurism, paving the way for modern psychological thrillers and slasher films. Sweet Sweetback's Badass Song, 1971. Melvin Van Peebles' Sweet Sweetback's Badass Song was more than a movie, it was a statement. Released on March 31, 1971 in Detroit and April 2, 1971 in Atlanta, the film told the story of Sweetback, a black man on the run from white authorities. It was gritty, raw, and unapologetically bold, a groundbreaking moment for independent black cinema. Van Peebles did it all. He wrote, directed, produced, scored, and even starred in the film. He shot it independently over 19 days, performing his own stunts and taking part in controversial sex scenes. With no studio willing to back the project, he funded it himself, even borrowing $50,000 from Bill Cosby to complete it. The movie was a financial success, earning millions on a budget of just $150,000, and its tagline, Rated X by an all-white jury, added to its rebellious appeal. The controversy was immediate. The film received an X rating from the MPAA due to its explicit content. Some theaters refused to screen it, and distributors cut 9 minutes from the movie to make it more palatable for wider audiences. In the UK, parts of the opening sequence were obscured to comply with child protection laws. Despite censorship, Sweet Sweetback became a cultural phenomenon. Critics were divided, but its fast-paced editing and jump cuts were seen as revolutionary. It resonated deeply with black audiences who embraced its defiance against white-imposed standards. The film's legacy is undeniable. It paved the way for the blaxploitation genre and remains a landmark in independent filmmaking. Bold, controversial, and ahead of its time, Sweet Sweetback's Badass Song broke barriers and left an indelible mark on cinema. I Am Curious, Yellow, 1967. Vilgot Sjöman's I Am Curious, Yellow sparked outrage and legal battles almost as soon as it was released. This Swedish drama, known for its explicit scenes, was first shown in Sweden in October 1967. When it made its way to the U.S. in March 1969, customs officials seized the film at the airport, declaring it obscene. What followed was a heated debate that reached the U.S. Supreme Court, which eventually ruled that the film was not obscene. The movie's content was groundbreaking for its time. It included scenes of nudity and simulated sexual acts, with one moment of Lena kissing her lover's flaccid penis standing out as particularly controversial. In Boston, police confiscated the film reels, leading to a ban under obscenity laws, and other cities followed suit. In Pensacola, Florida, the film was seized by sheriff's deputies, and the theater manager was charged with showing obscene material. In Denver, I Am Curious, Yellow, faced another ban shortly after its premiere. The district attorney declared it violated Colorado's new obscenity law. After a week-long legal fight, the ban was lifted and the movie reopened to a packed theater. But the censorship extended internationally. In the UK, the British Board of Film Censors cut 8 minutes of the film, while Australia removed 49 seconds. But these edits didn't stop the movie from gaining attention. It became a cultural flashpoint. Despite all the backlash, the film paved the way for more open discussions about sexuality in cinema. You see, controversy often sparks the most unforgettable conversations, and these 17 films prove that bold storytelling can leave a lasting impact. Whether you found these movies shocking, thought-provoking, or just plain outrageous, they've shaped the way we view cinema today. What do you think about these controversial films? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more incredible stories from Hollywood's fascinating history. See you next time.